All right. Might be a little hard for me to contain my smile this morning. Yeah, both my kids just left for the week, so feels so good. It's like the first day of school, right? Doesn't it? It's awesome. So I don't know if you're planning to have kids or not, but have them really close together so they could go to Hume Lake together. It's just awesome. So, well, we're jumping back into our series in 1 Corinthians, and we took a break last week for VBS, and now we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and I want to begin with this thought. Great achievements don't happen by accident. Achieving something great doesn't happen by accident. About 10 years ago, I was pretty serious about running, and I enjoyed signing up for races, marathons, half marathons, 10Ks. And, I was living in Uganda, and I thought, you know what? This is a golden opportunity to test myself out. Wouldn't it be cool to race against, the Kenyans and the Ethiopians and the Ugandans? I was in my late 20s, and so feeling a little overconfident, and so I signed up for a 10K. In Kampala, capital city of Uganda, and I trained, I prepared, I had my equipment, I had my pre-race meal, I was set to go. So it's race day. And I get there early, I get to the front of the starting line, not too arrogant so as to be right on the tape, but close enough to the front that I could start out with that front group. And so, the gun goes off, bam, and we are racing, and I knew I wasn't going to win. All right, but I was just looking to my left and right the whole race, just seeing the kind of shape the other guys were in, saying, yeah, I could hang with him. Well, he might be a little older than me or a little bigger than me, a little slower, So I'm sizing up the competition the whole race, and I'm feeling really good about myself. Heading to the final mile. And you're getting to the end of the race, and so you're really narrowing your focus down. You're looking ahead. You're not staring at your feet because you can't breathe like that, but you're staring at it. But every once in a while, you're looking out of the corner of your eye, and all of a sudden, I notice something shiny out of the corner of my eye. It's a guy's shoes. So I look over, and I notice that this guy's running in dress shoes. Then I look up, and I notice that he's not in shorts, but he's got slacks on. Then I look him up a little higher and notice that he's got a long sleeve shirt, cufflinks. He's holding a Bible in his hand. Literally, this guy was on his way to church, stopped, and decided to join the race. Not going to happen. Not going to happen to me. I am not going to get to the finish line. So we got about 200 yards to go, and I take off in a dead sprint. And I want to tell you this as a matter of fact. I lost to him by at least 100 yards. And I'd like to believe that somewhere around the world, he's bragging today about the time he beat that American runner without even trying. Everyone has a story about how they won or they achieved something without any effort, without trying. But for the most part, if you are going to achieve something great in life, it takes a great amount of effort. If you're going to lose a large amount of weight and keep it off, if you're going to pay off your debt, or if you're going to reach that retirement goal, if you're going to build a house or complete a marathon or build a fulfilling marriage, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort to achieve something great in life. And for the most part, except in the case of that one runner, great achievements don't happen by accident. If you're going to achieve something great, it's got to be a priority. You've got to have a plan, and you've got to be willing to make a sacrifice to achieve something great. The same is true when it comes to leading people into a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. It doesn't happen by accident. At ABC, we call this multiply. Multiply is simply leading others into a relationship with Jesus Christ. It's teaching and modeling for them what it means to follow Jesus Christ. This fall, we're going to be talking about our process of life transformation again. We have these words, engage, connect, grow, and multiply. They're hanging out there in the lobby. You see them when you're coming in. And for a lot of people, they look at those words, and some of you know what they mean. Engage, yeah, I feel okay about inviting my friends to a special event at church. I can engage them. Connect, yeah, I feel all right about joining a group, maybe joining a Bible study or getting involved in some kind of couples group. Grow, yeah, I'm all right with sitting in the study and learning a little bit and understanding the Bible anymore. Multiply, sharing my faith with someone else? No, that is way too scary. That's a huge, daunting task. Most people get to that fourth step and they're like, I don't really feel comfortable sharing my faith with someone else. And in our passage today, the Apostle Paul is going to share his plan for sharing our faith. He's going to talk, how can we share our faith with the people around us? And everything in Paul's life was centered on this purpose. So he made it a priority. It was his plan, and he was willing to sacrifice anything to share his relationship with Jesus Christ. So I'm going to begin reading for us in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, beginning in verse 14. It says, "In the same way, the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living by the gospel. But I have made no use of any of these rights, nor am I writing these things to secure any such provision. I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting. For if I preach the gospel, that gives me no ground for boasting. For necessity is laid upon me. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this of my own will, I have a reward. But if not of my own will, I am still entrusted with a stewardship." You see, if we're going to lead other people into a relationship with Jesus Christ, it must be a priority. That's the first point on your outline. It must be a priority. Pastor Jeff shared 2 weeks ago where in this passage about the idea that a minister of the gospel should receive their salary from the gospel. And Paul gave a convincing argument that a minister of the gospel should receive their salary from the gospel. In verse 14, it says that the Lord commanded that those who proclaim the gospel should get their living from the gospel. But here's the interesting thing. Paul then forfeited his right to any salary. Paul forfeited his right to receiving anything for preaching the gospel. He gave up his reward to show that his motives were pure. In fact, I think Paul gave that entire argument because he was thinking about the pastors and the ministers of the gospel that would come years and years after him. And he was thinking about providing for them, but for himself, he was not concerned. Paul didn't want compensation to become a distraction. He didn't want a salary or payment to distract him in any way. His priority was winning people to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And in verse 18, he continues on. He says, "What then is my reward?" He asks the question. "That in my preaching I may present the gospel free of charge, so as not to make any use of my right in the gospel. For though I am free from all, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more." Paul's whole goal was winning people into a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. This was his priority that guided him. And it specifically guided him when it came to his freedoms and liberties. And he's been talking about his freedoms and his liberties throughout chapters 8 and 9. And by way of review, what do I mean when I'm talking about our freedoms and our liberties? By way of review, Jesus Christ died to set us free. He gave us our freedom. He freed us from the wrath of God. He freed us from the punishment of sin. He freed us from the punishment of evil. He freed us from the limits of the law. We're no longer bound to perfect obedience to the law in order to receive some kind of salvation, some kind of security. And he freed us to love and to eternal life. He freed us so that we could spend eternity in heaven with God in perfect peace and perfect comfort. So the question that Paul keeps returning to is, how are you using your freedom? Christ died to set you free. How are you using your freedom? And there's 3 different ways that a Christian can celebrate their freedom. There's 3 different ways that we could live in freedom. The first way that we could use our freedom is to be a separatist. We could say, Christ died to set me free, so I'm going to remove myself from interacting with any unbelievers. This is much like the legalists that Paul warned against, the people who live by the law and wanted to separate themselves and alienate themselves from anyone who did not live by the law perfectly. Those are the separatists. The other thing that we could do with our freedom is we can use it to endlessly pursue pleasure. This is overindulging. This is enjoying every liberty so that we look no different from unbelievers in the way that we live in this world. Or there's a third path for freedoms and liberties, and it's the path that Paul chose and set the example for. It's that we could be servants to all, using every means at our disposal, every freedom and liberty that we have to win people over to Christ. And that's what Paul did. He forfeited his right to a salary or compensation or payment of any kind. He forfeited his personal freedoms and liberties. If it caused his brother to stumble, he wouldn't eat the meat that was sacrificed to idols. If what he drank caused his brother to sin, he wouldn't drink it. Whatever it was that Paul had to give up, he would give up anything to win someone over. And Paul forfeited any earthly reward that could be offered him because he wanted to boast that his motive was simply Christ alone, to please Christ. All to become a servant, so that through serving, through laying down his rights, through laying down his freedoms and liberties, he could win people over. And this was the same strategy of Jesus Christ. When Jesus Christ came to earth, he chose to be a servant to all. Christ forfeited his divine rights. He was God. He didn't like someone, I'm sure he could take him out. He didn't do that. He was God. He had all the wealth of this world could hold, yet he lived a poor, simple life. He forfeited any honor and privilege that came with being the Son of God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, all for the sake of winning us over and securing our freedom. And so Paul describes what this looks like, what it means to live in this freedom. He says in verse 20, he says, "To the Jews I became a Jew in order to win the Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside of the law I became as one outside of the law, not being outside of the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I might share with them in this blessing. I become all things to all men." You've heard that phrase before, haven't you? Well, what's he talking about? Paul had a plan. If you're going to lead someone into a relationship with Christ, if you're going to share your faith, point number 2, you must have a plan. And this was Paul's plan. Paul had a targeted message and a targeted approach for every person that he interacted with. To the Jews, he became a Jew. To the Gentiles, he became a Gentile. To the weaker brother, he became weak, all so that he might win them over and share with them what it meant to have a relationship with Christ. Now, often verse 22 is misquoted by people who want to overindulge in their liberties and proclaim that they've become all things to all people. So I do whatever I want because I'm all things to all people. You know, you want to party, I want to party. I'm all things to all people, but that is simply taking this passage out of context. Paul tells us his aim in becoming all things to all men, his strategy in doing so is not to give him license to do whatever he wants, but his strategy is to win others over. And he refers to that over and over again. Notice in this section, those verses I just read for you, he talks about winning others over 4 times. Paul gave up his freedoms and liberties to win people over. He repeats that over and over again. If I repeat something, it's important, right? Paul's repeating it over and over. Then he says, not only is he doing it to win them over, but he's doing this to save them. In verse 22, he's saying that by all means I might save some. And then in verse 23, he says he's doing this to be a partaker of the benefit of the gospel himself. For a believer to misquote this verse as a license to do whatever they want is the exact opposite of what Paul was intending. In becoming all things to all men, he wasn't exercising his freedoms and liberties and indulging in whatever he wanted. Paul was sacrificing his freedoms and liberties, becoming all things to all men for the sake of saving them and winning them over to Christ. If you're not a follower of Jesus Christ in the room right now, you're probably wondering, oh, I get it now, so I'm just a prize to be won. You're probably asking yourself, am I just a prize to be won? Is this how Christians earn points? Is this what Christians do? Like they have to win over a certain amount of people in their lifetime to get to heaven? Is that what he means by winning them over? Well, I have a 13 and 14-year-old boy, so let me give you a very practical example, all right? Most people think of spiritual things in terms of good and evil. So let's think of things in terms of Star Wars, all right? They've made about 16, 20 movies right now, so I think we all understand the concept of Star Wars, right? In Star Wars, you have this cosmic battle between the good guys, the Jedi, resisting the forces of the dark side. And you see often people like Luke who are pulled between the good side, the Jedi side, and between the dark side of his father Vader, right? And you see this cosmic battle, this spiritual battle, people being pulled between the good side and the evil side. And as Christians, we believe that we're also in a spiritual battle. We believe that there's also this spiritual pull, trying to pull people to the good side and trying to people to the evil side. But this spiritual battle that Christians are in it's not Christians fighting against people who don't believe. In fact, it's actually Christians fighting for those who don't believe because we love them so much, we want to save them from the power of darkness. In fact, there's a verse that when you read it thinking about Star Wars, it's actually pretty cool. It's Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. It says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood." We're not fighting against other people, but against rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, yes, you are a prize to be won. You're so prized by God, and he loved you so much that he gave his son, Jesus Christ, to die for you, to win you over. You are a prize to be won. There's believers in this room who love you so much that they invited you because they want to win you over to this good side. They want you to be on God's side because they believe that eternity hangs in the balance. Well, saved from what? That's the next question I've had. What are you saving me from? And the most straightforward answer is given in Romans chapter 5, verse 8 and 9. It says, "But God shows his love for us in this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since therefore we've been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God." And he's talking about saving, and what are we saved from? We're saved from the wrath of God. God is perfect. He's holy. There's nothing evil in God. And as the creator of the world, as the owner of the world, he cannot coexist with anything that is evil and with anything that is unholy. And so he must punish anything that is evil. And so we believe that the wrath of God is this punishment for evil. And if I have not given myself over to God, if I have not chosen to follow him, I will be punished by the wrath of God. You know, this is why Paul was deeply committed to winning people over. If we truly believe that Jesus saves us from the wrath of God, we should be invested in saving our friends, saving our family members, and saving people we love. But the question is, do we truly believe that the wrath of God exists? Do we truly believe that the wrath of God is coming? I'll describe it this way. My sons have the misfortune of being pastor sons, so we talk about the Bible a lot in our home. And so at a young age, I got them this Bible. It's called the Brick Bible. It's a Bible that tells Bible stories with Legos. It's perfect for boys. I got it for them when they were 5 and 4 years old, probably a little graphic for 5 and 4-year-olds, because it talks a lot about Satan and hell, and it doesn't leave out any parts of the Bible. And so one night we're reading through this page by page, and one night we're reading through it, and the topic of hell came up and God's wrath, and my older son Noah is 5 years old, and his mind is spinning, and he is scared to death, all right? This is bedtime. I think guys who aren't pastors are probably better at this. Right before bedtime, I'm telling the kids scary stories. Pray for pastors' children. Anyway, we're having this story, and he's asking me all these questions about hell, and so I just share the gospel with him. And he's just like, "Oh, yes, Dad, please, please." I mean, he wants to pray the prayer twice, 3 times, 4 times. Just save me. I don't want to go. Look at those Legos. They're bleeding. They're dying. There's fire. And we're having this conversation, and so I share the gospel with him. Noah believes. I'm thinking, oh, this is pretty cool. Well, the next night, the boys had bunk beds. And I could hear them talking in their room, and usually I'm like, "Shh, go to bed, quiet down." You know, the drill, the evening yell at your kids. You know, we do that in our home too. And so anyway, I'm hearing through the wall, and Noah's pleading with Caden. He's just saying, "Caden, I just love you so much. I can't stand the thought of you spending eternity in hell. Caden, you're going to burn. It's going to hurt. You will be punished forever. Think of how Dad punishes you. Think of that punishment never ending." And he's just pleading with him, and Caden's like, "Oh, gosh. And Noah's like, no, Caden, I love you. I love you so. You've got to believe." And he doesn't give up. And they talk on, and we got some stubborn genes in our family. But anyway, finally Caden relents. And he prays the prayer with Noah, and I'm thinking, oh, this is so sweet. But I'm wondering, 4 years old, does he really get this? Does he really understand? Well, the next day, Caden's out in the yard. He loves our dogs, and he's sitting there talking with Nala. And he's telling Nala, he says, "Nala, I love you." Nala, I can't stand the thought of you spending eternity facing the wrath of God, facing the punishment of God. And Nala's stubborn too, and so he's got a little doggy treat, and he's trying to get her to nod yes or no, and I see that wagging tail. Yeah, I see that response. And so he's trying as hard as he can to get a response because he loves his dog. See, friends, if we really believe that this life is brief and that eternity hangs in the balance and that the wrath of God is to come, then we should make every effort to save the ones we love. We should make every effort to share our faith. But I actually think this is one of the reasons why we make so little effort to share our faith. For most of us, we don't believe in God's wrath. We have a hard time wrestling with that. We don't believe that there's a punishment to come. God's going to count to 3, so I probably got 2 more chances after this life, right? Most of us, we live like this is the only life that matters. Most of it is about advancing our career and building our retirement and making ourselves comfortable here on earth, so comfortable that we don't have to worry about what's next to come. But I also think that many of us would like to change that about ourselves. Many of us would like to have that childlike passion and burden for the people that we love. Many of us would love nothing more to have that bunk bed conversation and tell someone we love the message of the gospel. And so Paul lays out his plan. It's a strategy of love. 1-point strategy. Here's the strategy. 1 point, it's a strategy of love. When Paul talks about becoming a Jew to the Jews, or outside of the law to those outside of the law, or becoming weak to the weak, referencing the weaker brother in chapter 8, what he's really saying is, I'd give up my rights to save someone. I'd give up my freedoms to save someone. I'd give up my preferences. I'd give up my desires. I'd give up anything also that some might be saved. Paul isn't advocating for selfishness, for liberty, for personal freedom, or for overindulgence. Paul's strategy is love, and he laid this out when he wrote another letter to the church in Galatia. In Galatians 5, verse 13, he said, "You were called to freedom, brethren. Only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another." He says, don't turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve each other. This is what we're called to do. Use your liberty to love and serve others. But as believers, we're constantly sliding, either separating ourselves from the world or overindulging and becoming just like the world. So there's a few questions that we could ask ourselves. There's a few things that we can look at and ask myself, well, where am I? And how am I doing it when it comes to this strategy of love? The first question you can ask yourself is, am I becoming just like the world? Are you becoming just like the world? This is the test of overindulgence. This is the test of just pursuing pleasure only. If so, you've crossed a line. Christ doesn't call us to lose our holiness. He calls us to gain the holiness of others. Christ doesn't call us to give up our holiness so that we could hang out with unbelievers. He calls us to keep our holiness and to gain theirs. Oftentimes, people say they're becoming just like the world as a strategy to win people over to Christ. My question is, who have they won over? Whose life is changed because of that strategy? Their life or yours? The one who's compromising or the one who's yet to believe? Are you winning the world over? Is the world winning over you? What are your motives for enjoying your freedoms and liberties? What are you pursuing? Paul didn't become a Jew to the Jews or a Gentile to the Gentiles to gain their acceptance. Paul did so to win their salvation. A lot of times we make this about us and we want people to like us. I really don't care if people like me. There's a lot of people who don't. What I do care about is that people love Christ and understand that He loves them. That's the goal. That's the aim. Second question you need to ask is, are you separating from the world? Have you isolated yourself and alienated yourself so that you're only spending time with other believers? This is the test of separatism. Paul spent time with the Jews. He went to them first. Whenever he went to a town, he would go to the synagogue where they would meet to worship, and he would preach to them first, and then he would go to the Gentiles and preach to them as well. He also spent time with a weaker brother. You know, he was intentional. Everywhere he went, he had a strategy looking for people who did not believe. Are we looking for people in our life who do not believe and looking for opportunities to share with them the hope we have? The third question, are we loving the world? Are we loving the world? Because that's what we're called to do. Paul was intentional about winning people to Christ. So this was his plan. He said, I'm going to love people. I'm not going to become like them. I'm going to become like Christ. And as I become like Christ, I'm going to love them as Christ loved them. He was dedicated to this strategy of love, and he disciplined himself for this strategy of love. Look at how he concludes this section in verses 24 through 27. He says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we are an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body, and I keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to sacrifice to gain the salvation of someone else? Are you willing to give up your freedoms and liberties? Paul's commitment to this strategy was loving and serving others was not easy. It involved being willing to sacrifice anything, whatever he would do. He was willing to sacrifice his time. He was willing to sacrifice what he ate and what he drank. He'd give up anything to win someone over, even wealth and money and any security that could come with it. Paul was willing to give it up. Paul was willing to give up any privilege he could enjoy, just like a professional athlete. You know, I was looking for an example of it this week and did some research on ESPN. I know some of you are shocked. But think about Tom Brady for a second. This is amazing about Tom Brady. He's probably one of the greatest athletes of our time right now. He's won 5 Super Bowls, 4 Super Bowl MVPs, 3 regular season MVPs, 13 Pro Bowls. He's 41 years old, going into a new season, and everyone's still scared of him, all right? He's the greatest of our generation right now. Some of you could debate me afterwards, but that's not the point. Here's the most amazing thing about Tom Brady. He goes to bed at 8:30 every night. This guy has got wealth beyond my imagination. He's got it all. He's achieved enough. He could retire today, and everyone would call him the greatest, or at least the Patriots fans would. But he's got it all, and yet he's still going to bed every night at 8:30, every day of the year. And here's what he said. This was a quote from Business Insider. I read a non-sports page article to get this. He says, I do go to bed very early because I'm up very early. I think that the decisions that I make always center around performance enhancement. So whether that's what I eat or the decisions I make about whether I drink or I don't drink, it's always football-centric. This guy could stop today, but he's not going to stop. It's always football-centric. He just wants to win, and he just wants to win another one. Why is he going? For another Super Bowl. Why is he going? For another Super Bowl. He just wants to win. What if we lived our lives Christ-centric, gospel-centric? What if we just woke up every day saying, I just want to win one person over. I just want one person, one more person in heaven. I just want one more person understanding just how much God loves them. I don't want people walking around in despair and depression without hope. I don't want people walking around lost. I don't want the people I love, my family members, my friends, walking around without hope. I just want to win one person over. What if that's how we woke up every single day? The prize that Paul was working for was not his own salvation. Paul had already received his salvation. Paul wasn't trying to earn a relationship with God. The prize he was working for was the salvation of others. This should cause us to ask about ourselves, do my relationships have a purpose? Am I purposeful in the relationships that I have with my family and my friends? Do my actions around them align with this purpose? Am I becoming like them, or am I calling them out to become like Christ? Who's influencing who? Who's shaping who? The Christian does not run the race to get to heaven. The Christian runs the race because we're already saved and we want others to win too. We want others to spend eternity with God. Paul didn't enter into relationships lightly. Paul didn't exercise self-control for no purpose. Paul understood his why for every relationship. He disciplined himself. He exercised self-control. He sacrificed to win the lost. He gave up everything in order to win the salvations of others. He didn't wait till their life was over or till they were on their deathbed to consider this question. Paul was purposeful in day-to-day relationships. He didn't wait till it was too late. Think about someone you love right now. Just think about someone that you love who does not yet have a relationship with Christ, who has not yet responded to the gospel. Get that name in your mind. How are you intentionally investing in that relationship? Is there anything that you need to give up, to sacrifice, to win them over to Christ? As you look at that relationship, would you describe it as a strategy of love? Are you still stuck and you don't have a name in your head? You might be too cut off from the world. If you're in the room today and you are not a believer in Jesus Christ and you do not know what you are doing here, this was probably a very weird and strange message. Literally, a pastor is standing up like a coach, trying to coach followers of Jesus, believers, into winning other people over. And that's probably strange. Here's what I want you to walk away with. If I had the cure for cancer, every form of cancer in the world, and I knew exactly how to heal people so that they would not have to suffer, no chemo, no radiation, I just had the magic pill, and I could cure the world of cancer, wouldn't I be the most selfish person in the world if I didn't share it with anyone? I mean, literally, when I died and people discovered what I'd been hiding, they would say that guy was awful. How selfish was he? And here's the thing you need to understand about believers in the world. We believe that sin is a cancer. We believe that sin leads to eternal death and separation from God. And we believe that the cure is Jesus Christ. And all you got to do is simply believe in him. It's as simple as a magic pill. That's what we believe. Now, I don't know if you've had a Christian share their faith with you. Maybe you felt judged. Maybe you felt condemned. Maybe you felt outed, like, gosh, if I don't believe, they don't want to have a relationship with me. Maybe they're going to cut me off. I won't get invited to the family gatherings. What I want you to know today is that if someone shared their relationship with Christ with you, however awkward or strange or uncomfortable that conversation was, here's what I want you to understand. Their motive was love. That person loved you so much that they're willing to have an awkward and strange conversation. That person loved you so much that they're willing to enter into a very strange situation in your relationship and to compromise that simply because they love you so much they can't bear the thought of you spending eternity separated from God. It's like my two boys. It's like that boy on the top bunk just pleading with his younger brother on the lower bunk saying, I love you so much. I can't stand the thought of you spending eternity separated from God. That's why people share their faith. And I just want to invite you, if you've never responded, today's the day. Today's the day. You just have to believe. And if that's still confusing, you grab onto someone else near you. Grab the person who invited you. Say, well, I guess you love me. And have them explain the rest to you. Or we're going to have a prayer team up here in the front who could pray with you. I'll be up front right here too. And we'd love to share with you. We've got the cure. It's Jesus. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for your great love. That you demonstrated that while we were still sinners, you sent your one and only Son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. God, that love is just simply too much for me to fathom or to grasp. But God, I want to thank you for that. God, I want to pray for those 276 students who right now are sitting in buses excited and giggling and eating way too much sugar. God, I want to pray that this week they would hear the message of the gospel. That however unloved they feel, however rejected they feel, whatever hurt they're going through, God, I pray that this week that they would realize and understand for the first time your unconditional love and how much you love them. And God, I pray that this would be the week that many would respond and believe. And God, we pray that this week would be the start of a lifetime of a relationship walking with you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
My heart to sing thy grace, streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, a mount of God's unchanging love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, and he to rescue me from danger and oppose his precious blood. Daily I'm constrained to be led by goodness like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Take and seal it for thy court above. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it. Send it to thy courts above. Come thy fountain of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mountain fixed upon it, Mount of God's unchanging love.
There's a great saying. I'm going to try not to butcher it right now. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. Whereas the only way that we're going to share our faith is through a strategy of love. And I think the reason why people are so scared of the church and so cut off from it is they feel the exact opposite of love. They feel judged, they feel condemned, they feel hurt. And friends, if we truly believe the gospel, and if we truly love our family and friends who have not yet believed, then we just need to pour out God's love on them and pray that they respond. If you want to respond today, we're going to hang it out up here. God bless you guys, and have a great week.